they lowered a drone 3,000 feet into the Bermuda Triangle. What it captured on camera made the crew stop the mission. For almost 80 years, this stretch of ocean has swallowed ships and planes without explanation. Over 1,000 of them, by some estimates. No wreckage, no bodies, no black box washing up on shore. Just silence and a name that makes people nervous, even now. But this time, someone finally got a camera down there into the zone where most of the disappearances cluster. And what the evidence actually shows isn't what anyone expected. On this channel, we don't chase theories, we check them against the evidence. So let's find out what's really down there. Before the dive makes sense, you need to understand why this patch of ocean became a legend in the first place. December 5th, 1945. 5 Navy bomber planes take off from Fort Lauderdale on a routine training flight. Flight 19. The lead pilot radios in that his compass isn't working. Then another. Within hours, all 5 planes are gone. 14 men. A rescue plane sent to find them vanishes too, with 13 more crew aboard. No wreckage from any of them has ever been confirmed found. That's just one entry on a long list. The USS Cyclops, a Navy cargo ship the size of a small skyscraper, disappeared in 1918 with more than 300 people aboard. No storm reported, no distress call. Gone. It remains, to this day, the single largest loss of life in U.S. Navy history, not caused by combat. And it isn't just the big, famous cases. Small private boats, fishing vessels, single-engine planes, flying routine hops between islands. They show up in the record too, scattered across almost a century, each one a name and a date, and very little else. A Coast Guard log entry, a family that never got closure, and nothing more. Over the decades, the theories piled up as fast as the disappearances. Some blame magnetic anomalies that throw off compasses. Some point to methane gas pockets on the seafloor, bubbling up and supposedly sinking ships by dropping the water's density out from under them. Some go further still, talk of portals, missing time, forces science hasn't caught up to yet. And some blame something far more boring: rogue waves, sudden storms, and a lot of ordinary human error dressed up over the years into something stranger. But that's the key distinction. A disappearance can be unexplained without being caused by something unexplained. Before you connect these cases to one another, you have to establish what the ocean itself can explain. Every one of those theories has one thing in common. Nobody had actual footage of this exact stretch of seafloor. Nobody had eyes on the zone where the disappearances cluster most. Until now. Now, deep sea teams have begun mapping sections of this Atlantic seafloor that had remained largely unseen, including areas associated with the Triangle's most famous disappearances. But here's the problem with all of those theories. Until someone could actually see what was on the sea floor, none of them could be tested against the thing itself. The crew behind this dive wasn't hunting monsters, just a small team of marine researchers and engineers running a custom-built submersible drone rigged with sonar, low-light cameras, and pressure sensors rated for water far deeper than they actually planned to go. The descent started calm, 200 feet, sunlight fading fast, 400 feet, and the water turns the color of ink. The only light left is the drone's own beam, cutting a narrow cone through nothing. On the surface, the boat is quiet, except for the winch feeding cable into the water. The depth numbers keep climbing, steady and impersonal, while everyone waits for the next reading. At 800 feet, the sonar starts picking up shapes on the seafloor. Nothing dramatic yet. Debris fields, mostly. The kind of scattered wreckage you'd expect after 80 years of ships and planes going down in the same general area. At that depth, the ocean floor drops away into water. Most surface vessels never see, and every 100 feet makes the drone harder to recover, if something goes wrong. At 1,500 feet, the readings aren't dangerous, but they're inconsistent enough to make the engineers check the instruments twice. The instruments were giving them something they could measure. The sonar was about to give them something they could see. Then, just past 2,000 feet, a shape appears on the sonar, regular enough to stand out from the surrounding rock, with long, straight lines where the team expected chaos. By then, nobody on the boat was talking about the legend anymore. They were watching the depth. They keep descending. 2,500 feet. The shape gets clearer on sonar, but the cameras still can't reach it. The water's too dark, too deep, and the drone's lights only cut so far. By 3,000 feet, they're close enough that the cameras finally pick up something. And whatever it is, it's enough to make the crew stop the mission right there, mid-dive, and pull the drone back toward the surface for a closer look at the footage. The footage would eventually explain what that shape actually was. But before we get to that, there's a more useful question, one that gets to the entire point of this channel. Why would two groups of experts looking at the exact same sonar data walk away with completely different conclusions about what it means? This is the part of the video that actually matters, not the mystery, the evidence. This is the whole reason the channel exists. Start with the claim side, because footage like this spreads online almost instantly once it leaks out. Online investigators looking at the sonar footage saw something deliberate in those lines and angles. Straight edges, right angles. To them, that's not what natural geology looks like. That's what construction looks like. Some point to it as evidence of a sunken structure far older than anything currently on record in that part of the Atlantic. Others tie it directly back to the disappearances, suggesting the shape is somehow connected to whatever has been pulling ships and planes off course for decades. A few point to unusual sonar echoes elsewhere in the dataset as proof that something down there is actively interfering with the equipment. Within days, clips like this end up everywhere, cropped, zoomed, slowed down frame by frame with arrows drawn over anything that looks even slightly geometric. It's easy to see why. In the dark, at that depth, a straight line feels like it shouldn't exist. It feels like proof of something, even before anyone's actually explained what. Then the same image was examined from another angle. Marine geologists who study underwater fault systems in this region come back with a very different read on the same sonar data. But there's an important distinction here first. A sonar image isn't a photograph. It's a reconstruction of how sound behaves as it travels through water and reflects off a surface. That means a clean-looking edge on the screen doesn't automatically mean there's a clean physical edge on the seafloor. Before calling a shape artificial, you have to ask what the instrument was actually measuring and what else could have produced the same image. Straight lines and sharp angles do occur naturally on the seafloor, especially in areas with fractured limestone or basalt, where geological faulting can produce shapes that look engineered but aren't. This particular stretch of ocean floor sits near a known fault system, the kind of terrain that regularly produces exactly this type of angular formation. As for the pressure and instrument inconsistencies during the descent, oceanographers point to something less exotic: thermoclines and salinity layers, which are well documented to distort sonar and pressure readings in deep water, especially near steep underwater slopes. And the sheer number of wrecks in the area isn't mysterious. Once you look at shipping and flight density data, this is, and has long been, one of the more heavily trafficked corridors in the Atlantic, which statistically means more accidents, not fewer explanations. So where does that leave us? The honest middle ground is this: the shape the drone found is real. It's on the sonar data, it's not fabricated, and it is genuinely unusual looking. But unusual looking and unexplained are not the same thing. The geology in that specific region is well documented enough that a naturally angular rock formation is not just possible, it's expected. The evidence doesn't rule out something more, but it also doesn't require it. That's the uncomfortable answer. Not everything down there needs a conspiracy to be interesting. That doesn't mean the theorists are acting in bad faith. Most of them aren't. When you're looking at a shape that sharp, at that depth, in a place with this much history attached to it, the instinct to reach for something bigger than rock and water is completely understandable. The evidence just asks for one more step. Before that leap, the step of checking what the seafloor actually does. In that exact location, before deciding what it can't be, the sonar had suggested a structure. The camera was finally close enough to test that interpretation. Reveal one: the geometry. Once the drone's lights hit it directly, the shape resolves into something far more identifiable than the sonar had suggested: a formation of fractured rock, stacked in long, unnaturally straight-looking ridges, consistent with the kind of limestone faulting geologists had already predicted before they'd even seen the footage. The thing that looked impossible on sonar turns out to be ordinary geology, doing what this particular seafloor has done for millions of years. Reveal 2. What's wedged into it. Debris. Not one wreck, but pieces of several, scattered and half buried, over what researchers estimate could be decades, possibly longer. And this part doesn't get a tidy explanation. Nobody's confirmed which wrecks it came from, or how long it's actually been sitting there. So the shape that looked artificial, that part has an answer. The wreckage sitting around it, that part doesn't. The thing that looked impossible was ordinary geology. The wreckage around it was the part that wasn't. Watch the footage again, knowing that, and it changes what you see. The straight lines are still there. The shadows still move the way they moved the first time you watched it. But now there's a name for it, and the name is geology, patient, unglamorous, and older than every ship that's ever gone missing above it, sitting down there in the dark, long before Flight 19 ever took off. Sometimes the evidence is stranger than the mystery. Sometimes it's just geology, doing what geology does, 3,000 feet down in the dark. Here's what's still unresolved. The debris field itself hasn't been fully cataloged. Nobody knows yet how many separate wrecks are represented down there, or how old the oldest pieces really are. That's a question for a future expedition, not this one. And the wider triangle is still full of seafloor nobody has ever put a light on, This mission mapped one small patch of one specific zone out of an area that spans hundreds of thousands of square miles. That doesn't make the remaining debris evidence of anything extraordinary. It simply means the investigation has reached the limit of what this dive can establish. And that, honestly, is the true state of the Bermuda Triangle right now, today, after everything we now know. Not a portal, not a single grand explanation. Just decades of loss, a lot of ocean nobody's properly looked at, and evidence that keeps turning out to be more mundane and somehow still more haunting than the legend. So here's the question worth asking. What would you want investigated next? The debris field, the sonar anomalies elsewhere in the zone, or another unmapped stretch of the triangle entirely? Tell me what evidence you'd want checked. If you want mysteries tested, instead of merely repeated, subscribe. There's plenty more evidence left to check.